Welcome to At the Table, a podcast by the Ohio Leadership Advisory Council. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Lolli, co-director of OLAC. This is a space where Ohio education leaders come together to explore timely and relevant topics shaping leadership, learning, and school improvement across the state. Whether you're a superintendent, principal, coach, or classroom teacher, there's a seat for you here. Let's get started. Today's podcast features Dr. Jim Gay, longtime superintendent and OLAC project coordinator, and we're going to be talking about assessment tools. Dr. Gay, whenever you started out as an administrator, we were working diligently back in that time period, trying to make sure that we were doing data teams and assessments and making sure we were making the right decisions. Can you talk a little bit about the struggle to be able to make the right decisions, because we didn't necessarily have the right tools at the time when both you and I started our administrative careers?
Yeah, it was certainly different. Things have changed quite a bit. I was an administrator starting in '93, and this doesn't have anything to do with assessment initially, but when teachers wanted help in a particular area based on feedback either they got from their classroom students or feedback from me, they'd say, well, where can I get help in this particular area? And we would go to our teacher library, which was 4 or 5 books on top of the microwave, to see what was in those books to help. If that information was not there, I would travel down to the University of Dayton and get information, pull it from the library and then bring it back. And when that was probably about a 45-minute drive to get down there. But that necessarily didn't have anything to do with assessment. In terms of assessment pieces for related to the functioning of our teams when we were creating teams, we would do things like informal surveys, informally ask people what they needed, and just through conversation, we'd try to find out what was missing. Now, that wasn't a very effective way to do things because some people were reluctant to tell you. Others were not reluctant to tell you, and they'd tell you quite a bit of things, some of which was not accurate. But we didn't really have a formal way to gather data. Sometimes we would do surveys, but they were surveys that we created on our own. So we really didn't have many tools. Then the OLAC website came out, and the first tools that came out that we used at the district level, we had a tool from Moving Your Numbers, which was a district guide you could download, and you could give it to people. It was a paper pencil guide. You would survey, and you would bring those surveys back, collate them, get the averages. And then that was kind of one way to gather data, which was better than what we were using before. At the building level, there was also a paper pencil. It was online, but it wasn't in a format that you could distribute, a BLT assessment. It was quite different than the assessment we have now. One, it was online, and 2, it did not have some of the tools and resources that the new assessments have. So didn't have much in the beginning. Then we had a couple paper pencil guides that we could distribute. And now we're transitioning to the assessment guides we have now.
I remember as a young administrator with so much data coming at us all the time. It was just a constant data flow to us. And I just remember how inefficient I was as an administrator, because I didn't have good tools to help me figure out what data was important, to figure out really was my building team, we called it a consensus team before OLAC came out, was my consensus team really making the right decisions based upon the right data, making sure that we were moving the building where we needed to move the building. And then whenever I was in the curriculum office, we had money coming at us, different grants that you could write, different grants that you could apply for at the State Department level, that sort of thing. And I never had a way to really, as a curriculum person, really judge whether or not that grant was truly as effective as it should be. And if we wanted to sustain it with district money, if I could argue that. And I think those types of tools are very necessary and needed in an environment whenever you're trying to make data decisions based on the data that you have at hand. But if you don't have quality data and you don't have quality tools to make sure that you're inputting that data in the right way, then you kind of just run around and spend lots of money, lots of time, effort, and energy, and not really see those results. And I know that in OLAC, there are several assessment tools besides the assessment modules that we have for teachers and administrators. We have some classroom-based assessment modules that are very good that people can use. There are some assessments that districts can use and then buildings can use. Could you talk about each one of those assessments and kind of give us the rundown of what those are for? How do we use them? Why would we want to use them?
Yeah, there are 3 nice assessments that we have on the OLAC website now, and they're a lot more friendlier in terms of us gathering data. The 3 are, there's what we call the OSAT, the Ohio Sustainability Assessment Tool. And basically that's used for grant purposes. Typically a district will get a grant coming in, and it'll be a multiple year grant, maybe 3 or 4 years. And if you think that the grant is making a difference, you want to find a way to keep it going after the money's gone, because the money does go away, and you do want to keep those practices going if it does help kids and it helps faculty and staff do a better job with kids. So we do have the OSAT. That is a online tool. It's a survey. I believe there's about 40 questions in the survey, and it's based on a sustainability tool created by the University of Washington at St. Louis. It targets 8 key areas for sustainability, including partnerships, communication, building networks. There are 8 areas, but there are 40 questions divided over the 8 areas. So what you would do as an administrator of that particular grant is you would send this tool to the folks who are working with you on the grant. They would fill out the tool online, you get the information back, and then you get a score in each of those 8 areas. What you can do after you get that information is you can find out the areas that you're doing well in, look at the areas you're not doing so well in, and over a period of time, try to build those areas you're not doing well in. So what happens if you do that? If you're able to make those connections and build capacity in the areas that you're not doing well in, the chances of keeping that grant going after the money's gone increases. And you as a former superintendent, and I'm a former superintendent, we're always tight on money. So the chances of a grant going forward aren't as great if that groundwork hasn't been done ahead of time. So the sustainability tool is a nice way to get that work done ahead of time. We recommend that you send it out the first year of your grant, and then the second and the third and the fourth, and kind of look for trends in terms of what are you doing well in, what areas maybe you haven't thought about in terms of sustainability. It's to shore up. So if you do find the grant to be effective, how can you keep it going?
Right. Would that interfere with having to have some grants require you to have an outside evaluator? Would that in any way interfere with hiring that outside evaluator?
Not at all. This is really just building the internal capacity and the connections internally, really to work with central office to see if there's ways to get funding either from the central office to keep the grant going, or if there's networks outside and other agencies that you can tap to keep the grant going. So it doesn't have anything to do with the external evaluator at all. Okay, so that's the first tool, the sustainability tool. And again, that's for focusing on grants. We do have 2 other online tools, and one of them is called the SIPR, the Systemic Improvement, I think, Processes Review. But the SIPR has been put together for your DLT district leadership team. You might call it something else, but it's created for a review of district level processes that are geared towards school improvement. Again, it's an online assessment. There are about 32 questions or 35 questions on this online assessment. And what that does is it assesses how the district's doing it in 4 discrete areas. Questions are interspersed within the survey. And then once folks fill out that survey, the administrator who's assigned it gets those results back. The results are compiled automatically, and then the administrator gets a document that shows how the district is faring in those 4 key areas. And there's a nice comparison score that they get. They get a comparison score that's ranked in quadrants. And the quadrants were based on 74 districts who took this SIPR earlier, a couple years ago. And these districts had heavy SST support before they took the survey. So their scores were quite high. But you'll get scores in those 4 areas. And then you should use those scores for a benchmark. You shouldn't worry if your scores were in the first or second quadrant. What they are is just a starting score for you, and they're a benchmark. Then also in that report, you'll get a practice profile for each of the areas. That gives you good information about what are acceptable practices in terms of what's happening in the district in acceptable scale. And the other nice thing you get with the SIPR is resources that you can use to strengthen each of those areas. And what we recommend is, first of all, that districts do give the SIPR, give it at the beginning of the year, and use it as a benchmark. Find maybe 1 or 2 areas that you'd like to work on. Either they could be areas that you're doing well that you want to even do better in, or areas that you'd like to strengthen. But select 1 or 2 areas, look at the resources that are suggested, and work with your DLT to improve in those areas or strengthen those areas. And then give the SIPR again at the end of the year. That's one nice way to show progress outside of assessment scores on pupil assessments or benchmarks. That's one nice way to find out, are we making good progress in our DLT in terms of the processes we have in place that research makes a difference for the capacity of staff to reach kids and for student outcomes as well. So the SIPR is the second assessment that we have in place, and that's been there 2 or 3 years we've had it. Again, another thing about the SIPR and all the assessments that's nice is once you get that report, then you can distribute the report as you see fit. Typically, districts will send the SIPR out to folks who are on the DLT, and they may have board members that, the board that they want to know. The board may want to know what's the progress of your DLT, but you as the administrator can decide who gets the report. The third report, or the third assessment that we have on, that's the new assessment, is designed for principals, and that's a BLT assessment for your building leadership team. That's the same type of assessment in terms of it being a quick online assessment. It targets 3 discrete areas that principals need to pay attention to in terms of the function of their BLT. Same number of questions approximately. What the principal does is assign their BLT members. There's an invitation portion to each of those assessments. They would email the BLT members. The BLT members would get a notification that this assessment is coming your way. They would complete the assessment, and then the head of the BLT would get the results back. Like the SIPR, you will get a score in terms of how you're doing in the 3 areas, a practice profile, and then you'll also get suggestions, OLAC resources that you can go to improve in particular areas. Like the SIPR as well and the OSAT, the sustainability tool, we recommend that you give it at the beginning of the year and check the results and get it at the end of the year. Giving it at the beginning of the year, both for all 3 assessments, is a really nice way to get conversation started, targeted conversation for each of those teams, where the team as a group can kind of decide collaboratively, okay, here are the results and where do we want to go.
So if I'm a principal or I'm a district administrator who wants to use one of these assessment tools, how do I get started on that? What do I need to do?
Well, there's a landing. We have a mega menu on our website. You would just go to the OLAC website. You would go to the mega menu on the website. That's in the towards the upper left-hand corner. Click on that, and then down towards the right, you'll see assessment tools. You click on that button. There'll be 3 different tools. There are hot links for the 3 different tools. You would go to the assessment you're interested in, click on that assessment, and then it tells you step by step what to do. Initially, for all 3 of them, you would give yourself a team name, and then you would also identify the district that you're working in. If you're working with the SIPR, it would be just the district. If you're working with the BLT, it would be the district and the school. So you would identify your district and school, and then you get a page that prompts you to put in the email addresses of the folks that you would like to get the assessment. At this point in time, those don't auto-fill in. What you would have to do is fill in the folks' name, the person's name, email address, comma, and then the second email address, comma. After that, there's an invitation button. Once you hit invite, the recipients will get 2 things will happen for the recipients. One is they should get an email notification that you've been invited to take the assessment. And if they're not OLAC users, once they click on the assessment, they'd have to create an account. If they are OLAC users, they still would get the invitation via email at the address you sent. But they'll also see, once they log into OLAC and they go to their dashboard, they'll see that assessment invitation on their dashboard. Then all they have to do is click and take it. Once they've completed it, it's just a 4 or 5 item Likert scale. There's a Likert scale for each question. Once they fill in the bubbles for each question and hit submit, then and submit it, the information then comes back to the person who sent out the assessment.
So these assessments are designed for sustainability purposes, mostly for their grant work that a district might be using. For the district level planning team, and then for a building level team that helps make decisions. And with those 3 things in mind, whenever I have the results from these surveys, these assessments that are on the OLAC website, then there are resources that show up that I can actually quickly click on the OLAC website. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for decision-making and then resources that will help with those decisions that we're trying to make.
For professional development in those target areas that you want to look into further. So it's just a great resource with everything at your fingertips. Excuse me. And in terms of districts, the tools are very useful for districts. Now, if you're a higher ed person and you're working with pre-service principals, it's also a valuable tool for pre-service principals or pre-service superintendents to get a feel for the assessment and what it can do for you. And if you are in the higher ed area, there is when you select district, you can select either higher ed, if you're a instructor at the higher ed. Also, they're constructed in such a way that, let's say you are working in a particular district like Tecumseh Local, but this is a practice one that you're doing for a class at an area university. You still can click on your own district. The results only come back to you. So it will not bother the district level administrator who has that role and responsibility. So those results would come back to you. So at the higher level, you can use it as well. And it's just a nice tool to show aspiring administrators what they can use to help them move the work forward in their district or in their buildings. I use it with the classes I teach as an adjunct.
That's a really great resource and really great information. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank our audience for joining us at the table. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Lolli, and it's been a pleasure to have you with us. If you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe and share with your colleagues. For more leadership tools and professional learning resources, visit ohioleadership.org. And until next time, keep leading with purpose.